When you think about massive military failures, I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of people, it's the Maginot Line.
Oh, absolutely. It's become a punchline.
It's the go-to metaphor for any kind of expensive, useless project. You know, the story we all hear is the French built this giant concrete wall, and the Germans just walked around it.
Right, a classic case of generals fighting the last war.
But, and this is what we want to get into today,
Hmm.
what if that whole story is just wrong? What if the Maginot Line actually worked exactly as it was designed to?
That's the fascinating part, because when you dig into the why they built it and how they plan to use it, a completely different picture emerges. It's not a story of incompetence. It's more of a tragedy.
So let's do that. Let's almost treat this like a class and go back to the beginning. We're in France in the 1920s.
Yeah.
World War I is over. France won, technically.
Technically is the right word. I mean, France was gutted, utterly devastated. We're talking 1.3 million soldiers dead.
Entire generation.
A whole generation. And the country's industrial heartland in the Northeast, where all the iron and coal was, it was just rubble. They were facing a genuine demographic crisis.
They just didn't have the men for another war.
They couldn't match Germany. They knew that in about 20 years, Germany would have twice as many young men of fighting age. So the math just wasn't on their side. They had to find a way to substitute something for manpower.
Concrete.
Concrete and steel. The whole driving force behind the line was never again. They could not and would not fight another war on French soil. They needed a shield, something that would let a small number of troops hold the border, freeing up their main army to be the sword.
And when you say shield, I think people picture a long wall.
Mhm.
But this was so much more than that. The scale of it is just mind-boggling.
It's less of a line and more of a linear underground city. The cost was astronomical, somewhere between 3 and 5 billion francs at the time.
These weren't just bunkers. They were called ouvrages,
Yeah.
fortresses.
And they were genuine marvels of engineering for the 1930s. I mean, this was the absolute peak of fortification technology.
Let's just take one maybe as an example.
Wait.
Like Ouvrage Hackenberg. This thing was enormous.
Hackenberg is a perfect example. We're not talking about a few damp concrete rooms. This was a subterranean complex that housed over 1,000 men.
1,000 men living underground. And they had an electric railway inside it.
Yep, kilometers of underground trains just for moving shells and supplies from the deep magazines up to the guns. They had their own power stations, their own hospitals, kitchens.
And air conditioning. Which sounds like a luxury, but it was actually a defense mechanism.
It was crucial. They had an overpressure system. So if the Germans used poison gas, which was the great fear after World War I, they could literally pressurize the entire fortress so clean air would be forced out of the cracks, preventing any gas from seeping in.
That is just. It's genius. And the guns themselves were something else? These retractable turrets.
The eclipsing turrets, yeah. Imagine a massive steel dome with a 135 millimeter cannon inside. It would rise out of the ground on a hydraulic lift, fire a few rounds, and then just sink back down into its concrete shell before the enemy could even target it. It was sci-fi stuff for the time.
If you are enjoying this video, please watch it until the end. This greatly helps the channel and encourages us to continue our work.
And we should also mention that this tech wasn't just for show, it really worked. There was a whole other section of the line in the southeast facing Italy.
The Alpine Line.
The Alpine Line, or the little Maginot Line. It was built differently, integrated into mountains and cliffs. And when Italy did invade in 1940, that line stopped them cold. The Italians made almost no progress, so the forts themselves, they were not the problem.
Okay, so this brings us to the big question.
Yeah.
The one everyone asks. If this thing was so amazing, why did it just stop? It covered the German border, but then it hits the border with Belgium and nothing. Why build half a wall?
Right. And this is where the popular history gets it so wrong. It wasn't an oversight. It was a very deliberate choice. And there were, 3 main reasons for it.
Okay.
The first one is pretty practical. The terrain. The ground up there near Belgium is flat, it's industrial, and the water table is incredibly high.
So it's basically a swamp.
It's a swamp. Trying to build these deep, multi-level underground fortresses, there would have been an engineering nightmare and wildly expensive.
They were already spending billions.
They were, which brings us to the second reason, politics. In the 1930s, Belgium was France's ally. You just don't build a giant wall between you and your ally.
That's not a great look.
It's a terrible message. It basically says, hey, we expect the Germans to invade you, and when they do, we're locking our door. Good luck. France needed the Belgian army to fight alongside them.
So it was a diplomatic decision as much as an engineering one.
But the third reason is the most important one. It's the strategic reason. The French High Command didn't want an impenetrable barrier from Switzerland to the North Sea. They wanted a gap.
They wanted to leave a door open.
I wanted to create a funnel.
A funnel. Okay, now this is the part that changes everything.
This is the whole key. The Maginot Line was the shield. It blocked the direct invasion route, the path Germany had used before. By making that right suicidal, they were deliberately channeling the German army, forcing them to go north.
Into Belgium.
Into Belgium. The French plan, it was called the Dial Plan, was to let the Germans make the first move into Belgium. Then the French would unleash their sword.
Their best troops, their mobile divisions.
Exactly. The best French and British armies would race into Belgium and meet the Germans there. They wanted the decisive battle of the war to be fought on Belgian soil, not French soil.
So when people say the Germans just walked around it, they're actually describing the French plan succeeding.
In a way, yes. A French general from that time would say, good, that's precisely what we wanted them to do. The trap was set. The tragedy is that the French ended up being the ones caught in it.
And that leads to this idea of the Maginot mentality. Did building this incredible concrete safety blanket make them too comfortable, too rigid in their thinking?
I think it's impossible to argue that it didn't. When you pour so much of your budget, your national pride, into a static defense, you start to believe in static defense. It created a false sense of security.
They started to believe their own hype.
And they assumed the next war would look a lot like the last one. A slow, grinding war of attrition. They thought the line gave them time to mobilize, time to react. But the Germans weren't planning a slow war.
They were planning something completely different.
Speed. Blitzkrieg. The German High Command, specifically General von Manstein, knew they couldn't attack the Maginot Line. They also knew the Allies expected them to go through northern Belgium, so they came up with this incredibly audacious plan.
The Sichelschnitt. The sickle cut.
That's the one. They sent a smaller army group into northern Belgium, just like the French expected, a feint, to draw the best Allied troops forward.
Walking right into the trap.
Or so they thought. But the real attack, the main armored punch with hundreds of panzer tanks, wasn't aimed at northern Belgium. It was aimed somewhere else.
The Ardennes forest.
The Ardennes. This hilly, densely wooded area that the French High Command had officially declared impassable for tanks.
Impassable. That word is always a red flag in military history.
It's a death sentence. The French thought the forest was a natural extension of the Maginot Line. They barely defended it, just put some second-rate reserve divisions there.
And the Germans just drove right through it.
It was an incredible gamble. There was a traffic jam of German tanks that stretched back for almost 250 kilometers. If Allied reconnaissance had spotted that column and bombed it, the invasion would have been over. But they didn't.
They were looking north.
At the decoy?
They were looking north. So the German panzers burst out of the forest deep in the French rear. They were behind the Maginot Line, and more importantly, they were behind the elite Allied armies that had just rushed into Belgium.
They cut them off. They sliced them off completely. The sword was severed from the shield. The Maginot Line itself was fine. Its garrisons were sitting there ready to fight. But the war was being decided 100 miles away. The forts had been strategically bypassed.
And it wasn't just this grand strategic maneuver. There was a technological shift happening, too. I mean, we have to talk about Fort Ibn Email.
Yes, Ibn Email is the perfect tactical microcosm of the entire campaign. This was a Belgian fort, not French, but it was built on the same principles. It was considered the strongest, most modern fortress in the world. Impregnable.
And it fell in. What a day.
Less than a day, and not to a massive siege. The Germans did something nobody expected. They didn't attack it from the ground. They landed gliders on the roof.
Silent gliders. Just landed right on top of it.
Right on top. A small team of elite paratroopers. And they brought a new toy with them. Hollow charges.
Shaped charges. An explosive designed to punch through armor.
Exactly. Instead of exploding outwards, it focuses all of its energy into a single molten jet. It can melt through solid steel. So these few dozen German soldiers landed, walked over to the giant gun turrets, slapped these charges on top, and just blew them apart. They neutralized this impregnable fortress from the inside out in minutes.
That's terrifying. It proved that the very idea of a static fort was becoming obsolete.
It showed that a clever enemy with new tactics, in this case vertical envelopment, could defeat raw strength.
So let's bring it all back. With all this context, the Ardennes, Ibn Email. did the Maginot Line fail?
It's the big question, and I would argue that the line itself, the physical structure, did not fail. In the few places it was directly assaulted, it held up incredibly well. Only one major ouvrage was ever taken by direct assault. Most of them held out until the armistice was signed. Some commanders refused to surrender.
Because they hadn't been defeated.
They were perfectly safe, underground, with plenty of ammunition. The tool worked. The problem was the strategy around the tool. The shield held, but the sword was shattered. The failure was a lack of a strategic reserve, a failure to react when the enemy did the unexpected.
A failure of imagination, really.
And it's a lesson that is, well, it's still incredibly relevant. There's this idea in modern defense circles of a silver bullet solution.
Like what?
Things like relying too heavily on air power or cyber warfare or long-range missiles to solve every problem. It's a kind of modern Maginot mentality, the belief that technology alone can make you secure.
But the enemy always gets a vote.
The enemy always gets a vote, and if you build an impenetrable wall, they won't try to break it. They'll find a way to go over, under, or around it. Security isn't a thing you can build and then forget about. It's a process.
A constant adaptation. So what happened to these forts? They're still out there, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they're not going anywhere. During the war, the Germans actually used them as bomb-proof underground factories. Then, during the Cold War, NATO repurposed some of them as secure command bunkers and even storage for nuclear weapons.
Wow.
The engineering was just that good. Today, a lot of the big ones are museums. You can go visit, ride the little electric trains through the tunnels. It's an incredible experience.
So it's an engineering triumph that became this strategic tragedy.
Yeah.
It was so effective, it literally forced the Germans to invent a whole new way of fighting.
It forced them to take that massive all-or-nothing gamble through the Ardennes. If that gamble had failed, and it very nearly did, we might remember the Maginot Line very differently. It forced Hitler to roll the dice. He just got lucky.
Which leaves us with a final kind of unanswerable question. If the French had just built the line all the way to the sea, if they'd walled off Belgium too, would it have worked? Or would that have just created an even bigger Maginot mentality, leaving them even more vulnerable? Is it ever actually possible to build true security out of concrete? Or does building the wall just make you blind to all the new ways your enemy is learning to climb? If viewers enjoyed the video, they can subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell to be notified about new videos, click the like button, and share the video with your colleagues, as this helps us maintain the channel. Thank you.